what it is, we're not quite sure, are we? What is this new format from FIFA or UEFA? Do we know yet?
Yeah, it's really interesting you say, and I think there's been a lot of confusion with the tournament. And England play a friendly against Croatia on Friday in Croatia behind closed doors, and it must be a really strange atmosphere playing behind closed doors, because these players used to playing into thousands of people throughout the week, and to have an atmosphere behind closed doors. And then Spain will be a test, I think, because it is a competitive game. My understanding is that the tournament does give you the opportunity, if you finish in the semi-final, the final four, to go into a playoff for the European Cup. But all that said and done, you'd like to think that England should qualify before then.
I mean, overall, it will be a bit spooky, as any of you listening that perform know. To play to a large audience, it becomes one massive nothing. But to play to a small, it'll essentially be journalists, I guess. It will be spooky. See, you're right. You can hear everything you're saying, but they'll get over that. They're professionals. It is the first time in England's history, though, that they've played to no crowd. But these young guys aren't bothered. They've already won the World Cup at under 17, under 20. Yeah. It's an exciting one. Croatia, good team, one of the hardest teams to play away, apparently, of all the nations. Very fervent, passionate national team. So it'll be exciting, and he's gone youthful.
There is that, and you make a really good point there about the passion. And Croatia certainly is a very proud nation. They're a very strong sporting nation, considering the size of the population there. They do well in a number of sports, and the football teams certainly punch above their weight. I think as well as that, the technical ability. Now, we can remember from the World Cup where Croatia in the second half and beyond had dominated England, and I think that they made the final of the World Cup on merit. They were a good team. They beat Argentina in the group stages. They got through some of the knockout games on penalty shootout, but they showed so much test of resilience against the England team. And I think you're right, they've got that passion and resilience, but they're a very, very good technical team too. Let's not take that away from them, that's for sure.
Yeah, you're right, and this is where we start to get into Southgate's report upon his managerial input so far, because you're right, they've got what all the great teams, they've got that gnarly old fox, both in the mentality and the technique, so they know how to keep the ball, they know how to provoke you, and their midfield, as we've seen Modric winning the Ballon d'Or, knocked to those two people that we need not name off the top spot for the first time. They've just got that know-how, and we seem very not just young in age all of a sudden, we seem very young in terms of confidence, and very naive in a way, and so when are we going to get to a point? And it's quite apt that we're playing them again, actually, because it was a poor performance in many ways. We started bright for 20 minutes and then just slowly ebbed away, which seemed to be the pattern actually of England during the World Cup, and that leads us to look at Southgate. He played the same team every game, and also he was very reactive, to never changed his formation, never changed the personnel until very late in the game. So we had fatigue and a bit of, I'd say, naivety. I'd say that's my initial thoughts on Saturday. I know he's getting lauded, but England, if we want to be the best at losing in every sport like we have been, we want that to continue, we'll simply laud him without questioning. So what do you think of Southgate?
Yeah, I think he did well. I think he did well. I think the World Cup, in a way, for England was a bit of a false economy, in the sense that, okay, take nothing away from the achievement. To make a semi-final of the World Cup is no mean feat, but you've got to look at they didn't really beat a top-tier nation as such in that sense. What I would say about Southgate, I think he sort of knew the limitations of his team. I think that if it's not broken, don't fix it. He went on a bit of a winning run, and I think that he's the right person for the job at the right time. Going forward now, England's got some great players coming through. Under 17, under 20, they've got some fantastic players coming through that have done really well, as good as any other players around the world at the moment. They've won stuff, and it's really important for me to bring these players through and nurture them. Yeah. Because I think they're the future of English football. I truly believe the Southgate got the best out of the team he had at the World Cup. But
I disagree with that.
okay, interesting point.
I think it's fairly damning that he's the right man at the right time, because we don't have any English managers. They wanted to go back to an English manager after a well-documented failure with foreign managers. He came from the youth team setup. The only way to go with that England team was to go youthful. Unbelievably, and I still have glee announcing that we won the World Cup at under 17 and under 20 level. The old team was a busted floor. Any manager was have to go young. He shouldn't get so lauded for that. And he was the most au fait and familiar with them, so he was always we always had to go young. But you're right, he was most well placed to promote the best of the young talent.
Yes.
And we can't just rush it. The under 17s obviously need a bit more time, as we've seen with Foden this week not being picked, and we'll get onto that later why, and then the state of young English footballers in the Premier League, the lowest in all the European leagues of playing time on the pitch. But yeah, I think he had a great formation, probably cleverly picked up on having no midfield, so that's why he had to go 5 or 3-5 more defensively. But he stuck with the same players every single game, and for me, Sterling, Ali, and who's the other Man United player? We should know, be in the foremost sports show, Lingard.
Yeah,
those two weren't quite doing it for me, and leaving Pro and Henderson, who's not like he gets. I've seen him lauded, I've seen him knocked down. I think he's great in that pivot role. He knows how to play a forward pass, and he's very mobile. But he never experimented with dropping Sterling, for example, into a deeper position where he's great at dribbling. And Lingard, I still don't know what Lingard does. He has a purple patch, but what is he? I mean, he's still so far this season. And I know he's fatigued, but he never experimented with Ruben Loftus-Cheek or dropping Sterling into that position. He started late with even Everton playing Rose. That was a big mistake, I think, at left. Ashley Young, although he's a good leader, considering they're all young. So there, for me, he didn't experiment with that crucial midfield, and we get beaten in the midfield. That's why teams could come back of us who didn't kill them off at the start.
I think for me, looking at the team, I think he accepted that England didn't have a Modric, Ronaldo, a Messi. Not that I'm sort of suggesting they play similar roles, but they didn't have an out-and-out midfielder who could sort of take the game or attacking player. So I think for me, he went for a combination of players that could make up for not having a game changer. I mean, they're great players in their own right, and they did the job. But certainly there was no one in the midfield or no attacking options that England had that would fit in the mould of, say, a Ronaldo or a Messi. And I think for me, he sort of decided that, you know what, this is what I've got. I'm going to focus on set pieces, going to get really well organised. And the likes of Ali, Lingard, the Rashes of this world, get the most out of them, really. And some of these players are young, and they may go on and certainly become in that mould, who knows, but at the moment they are what they are. And I think for me there was a big reliance on Kane. I really felt that he played well, he had a good World Cup, there's no doubt about that. But
he was obviously fatiguing through the tournament. I think so. There was no gas left after 30 minutes in Croatia.
I think so. He had a glorious chance against Croatia, and you know, it's one of them, really. He takes that chance. It's a different game altogether. But that's said and done. There's no disguising from the fact that Modric just ran the show in the second half, and there was no answer for that sort of tactical awareness that he had. I think for me, he knows the young players really well. He's going to bring them through. Whether they can sort of progress to that next level is anybody's guess. I think what's really important this week is he's picked a player that had to go outside the Premier League. We know Sancho, who came through the system at City, he got signed by the Bundesliga team Borussia Dortmund, and he's picked him in. He's doing really well over in Germany, and I think that's really important because players don't always develop until their maturation, 21, 22, 23, and it's all too easy to sort of cast players one side. So I'd like to see more England players take the opportunity abroad, like the other lad did too, Mason Mount, who went out to Holland to play. So I think some of these young players, 17, 18, you're better off playing first team football than reserve team football, in my opinion.
Or the odd 5 minutes like Foden.
Precisely. My exact sentiments. And I think you've got these players coming through, and it's not easy to win international football matches these days. There's some good players that play around the world there's no easy games in international football these days. You know, we're aware of that. Teams are organised. Most teams have got professional players. Most teams have got a game plan. Now, going into the World Cup, Clifford, one thing that people forget, and I'll put that out to the listeners, is that teams prepare for weeks on end, if not months on end. And you've got professional players that are preparing with game plan. You've got modern technology that sort of can give you an idea of strengths and weaknesses. Teams going to World Cups now, there's no mystique anymore. They are well prepared. They play against each other every week. They all know each other, and it's tough to win international football games.
That's what goes for Southgate. I mean, I still think he's the best we've got, but I don't think he's amazing. I think he's timid and reactive. But like you say, there's very short time to get that gel, that synchronicity. And so he had a very clear game plan, which was crucial. He had a very clear ethos. But going back to the players, we've got some of the, as we've said, the 20 and the 17 World Cup, we can't afford to waste this crop. And we've got a big problem because I think, is it 30% of the Premier League is English. So there's so many cases of stillborn footballers that don't get the exposure, and it's no good having 5 minutes at the end of a Premier League game or playing in the Carabao Cup. But also you grow as a person, because football is dependent on your character, and your confidence and everything. So to go abroad, it's endlessly beneficial. So, for example, Sancho now, he's got 8 assists, 1 goal. He's played in 2 Champions League games, and he's actually replaced our bright young hope, Foden, both from the same club, Man City. Foden's had, I think, collective 20, 30 minutes. Everyone's raving about him. Sancho's trumped him to the England team. That tells you the English staying at home versus going away. And I know a lot of ex-pros are here, or even current players, saying, oh, it's better to stay in the first team, it's better to play with the great players, even if it's training. But I don't think it is. You've got to you grow in the field. You don't get battle hardened in theory, do you?
I mean, there's a huge difference between first team football and reserve team football. Reserve team football, you've got players coming back from injury, you've got players who haven't quite made it yet. A huge gulf in reserve, and we see it when we watch the FA Cup. We see it when some of these Premiership teams during the FA Cup rest a few players, bring a few players in that have been on the periphery. Just that intensity. I went to a few FA Cup matches last year, and one of the games I went to last year was Tottenham versus Rochdale at Rochdale, and Tottenham had rested a couple of players for that game, and you could just see the battle-hardened first team, albeit a League One team against a Premiership team, took them all the way. And in my view, I thought they were really unlucky not to get a result or win the game. They got a draw and they got beat at Wembley, but I really think that there's a huge difference between first team and reserve team football. And I think for any young player out there, you want to get yourself into that first team and play regular football wherever it is. And you made a great point there that, I think as much as anything else, culturally and lifestyle and understanding a different way of life, albeit, Germany, Holland, it's not a million miles off the cultural values and lifestyle someone experiences living in this country. But it's just the fact that you're away.
It'll be a big change. You're walking into a face of fear. You're growing as a person, which can only help you on the pitch.
I think so, yeah. Just not have your family around like you would who, and the network. And I think some of these players as well, sometimes they're built up. They're like in a little bit of a bubble. They've come through the system at a City, at a Liverpool, at a Man United. And they're the sort of...
soft.
Yeah,
in a way.
Well, I mean, sort of people tell them sometimes what they want to hear or not what they need to hear. And I've seen it in the professional game, and in my experience of working in the professional game, some of these players, it's like the classic one for me, and you've made the point there, these 17s and 20s, and, there's some good players coming through, but equally, like in the past, the golden generation, to me, I'm going to sort of throw it out there and think that I don't think they were that golden. I really don't know how. There were some good players, don't get me wrong, but people say they can't get their head around how they didn't win a tournament. They blame the manager. The manager at the time took a lot of stick, and they probably could have been more expansive in their game, but equally, were they really that golden? I mean, some great players there, the Gerrards, the Lampards.
You go through the team player by player, and it was absolutely glittering.
But is it? I've got to blame that.
And they were the last generation that had it tough. Like, not tough, but they got a bit bullied. Like the class of '92 got bullied growing up, and they were they were tough.
Yeah, but are they a golden generation because we see them in the Premiership and we don't see some of the players that? I mean, they were great players.
Everyone rated Scholes as the best.
I agree exactly.
It's got to be down to Sven. He was like friends with him, and he wouldn't, and he wanted to play a 4-4-2, He wanted to play Gerrard and Lampard, and he wouldn't risk.
Scholes.
I think that was a great generation.
How Scholes didn't get 100 caps is beyond me even more, and he's certainly one of the best midfielders, if not the best midfielder in the Premiership. But the point being is that, okay, we call them the golden generation, and
I think they were the last of the. They're a bit toughened out. They got a bit bullied growing up, on the training ground to clean the boots, got put in the washing machines. They got bullied a bit. It's so cosseted now.
Not to advocate they do that. It's obviously, protection laws that have come in, and the rules have changed these days. And
that's why players need to get a break. You need to break out your environment. You want to grow as a person. You want to be a better footballer, but more importantly, a person. You've got to break out your environment.
But do you not think that the golden generation was slightly overrated in one sense? Do you think that
I think they're right. You look at every single position.
Yeah,
they were virgin world class. Owen, Cole, Ferdinand. They were brilliant. We should have won something. We should have won. It was remiss of the FA.
But then look at, say, the French. They had Henry, Zidane.
They won 98. They won the World Cup.
Precisely. And look at the
Brazilian They were mismanaged. Team. It's the same now with management. Like let's look at Mourinho. They set the whole tone and the mood, and there's a million players in the divisions 1 to there's thousands of players in divisions 1 to 4.
Yeah.
They'll just be they'll do well, they'll have a good career, but every now and then there'll be a manager that comes along and forces a team. And the whole point of him is to be greater than the sum of your parts, and he's not doing it. Of course, a lot depends on the manager. Of course, a lot depended on Sven and Fabio and Steve. Steve, the Wally with the brolly. You can't. I know the players say it's about the players, but no. I mean, it is about the players, and that victory that we just saw, the 3-2 game, great Shakespearean football as drama. You'll never see a better game. They played. They won that because it was them. They didn't want, and Mata said it. They didn't want to feel like they lose. Their pride kicked in.
I mean, there was a good change by Mourinho. To be fair, he made the change.
Apparently, the players decided that at half time.
Wow, interesting stuff. I don't know about that, but
I think they did. I think they're fed up with his reactive. They reduced sport to misery. And the opportunity of least mistakes. I
think with Mourinho, there's no taking away from the fact that he's been one of the most successful managers of his generation, to be fair.
Of course, he has.
What concerns me is that player power, and I think that there was a lot of talk about Mourinho if he didn't win the game, a lot of rumblings on that if he didn't win the game, he would have been sacked and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's why it was epic. I mean, to 2-0 down in 10 minutes, never been done at Old Trafford for 18 years.
But I think that's frightening to think that basically, if that's the case, I don't know for sure if that would have happened, but the scary thing is that at what point do collective responsibility, I mean, for me, from an outside looking in, I don't know a great deal what's going on at United at the moment, but I'd like to think that the powers that be, above and beyond Mourinho as well, have some accountability. The players,
of course,
and I think
crucial. The overreaching structure as well.
They had a chance to say, for me, they had an opportunity to say, you know what, we're going to back Mourinho irrespective of what happens because we believe in him. We've got our man.
Yeah.
He's won as many trophies as anybody else. For me, the rot sets in prior to Sir Alex Ferguson handing in his sort of final notice. I think at that point there, you see a team that's sort of reaching its peak, and certainly a team that needs rebuilding.
Heavily rebuilding.
Exactly.
It's a tough job for anyone coming in.
I think so. Moyes comes in, and he does the best he can, what he had. And I think after that, they've sort of changed, and they've done what United don't normally do, try and change managers. And I think for me, the managers have been made the straw man, so to speak, for what's happening at the club at a higher level. I think it's easy to say, you know what, it's Mourinho, it's whatever. I mean, there was talk of Zidane coming in. What can Zidane do any more than Mourinho? He's not worked in the Premiership before. Okay, he's done well at Real Madrid in the Champions League. We'll give him that. He was a great player. But what can Zidane do any more than...
You're right, he's untested at creating and running a team long term with his own... But he's got a lot of good players, but don't underestimate the mood and the intent of it. Mourinho's only been great at small clubs where they can be against the world, you know.
The siege mentality, for sure.
But then
you've got Zidane comes in, And, for a few matches, the mood...
Zidane's risky. Risky. And you're right, it goes back to the top. And they're both culpable, Mourinho and the owners. The owners, the opposite to... Forget how Manchester City get their money. What they've done with the money, the 1.3 billion, they've not just built a whole ethos at Manchester City, they've built a whole mini-city with university.
That's right.
Look, all that this is, and we know what it is, they're at Man United at the apex of business as sport, as vulture capitalism. They've come in and they're just taking out as much as they can. They've still got the same debt. It's disgusting. And this is what's interesting with parallels in Formula One. With Ferrari right now, what's happened to Vettel? The problem is at the head of Ferrari, there's two men taken over from financial owners that used to run Philip Morris advertising campaigns for the cigarette industry. They don't know, and that might have made a difference. And same with Ed Woodward. He's not a football man. He doesn't know how to run it. Belatedly now they're trying to put in the structure. But between them and Mourinho, they've sapped the intelligence, the strategy, the joy, the money. It's a very different place, Old Trafford, now to when I left this town.
Yeah, and I think to add sting in the tail as well, I think the fact that City, and I think United fans are going to have to accept that it's very unlikely they're going to have the same dominance they had prior to Chelsea and City having heavily investment.
Look at Liverpool for 30 years. It's easily done.
It is, and I think that United's a big club, one of the biggest clubs in the world, and they've got to be up there, they've got to be challenging. They were second last season, and they were second to a City team that spent a considerable amount of money over a long period of time to establish themselves. And I think that the hard thing is these days is that it's hard for one club to achieve the dominance they had before, because on one hand you've got heavy investment, you've got City got a big investment, you've got huge investment at Chelsea obviously, but then equally throughout the league the TV money is making all teams competitive. I mean, Leicester to win the league a few seasons ago, that would never have happened in years gone by when the Premiership first started and the disparity of income was at a bigger proportion than what it is now. We've seen teams can be competitive. So these days, it's hard to go and beat a Southampton. It's hard to beat the likes of a Leicester. It's not easy to get a result against a West Ham. It's not easy in that respect. And I think that you've got like a tier, the big 4 or 5 clubs up there on any given day. Obviously, they can beat each other. But I think for sure the investment that City's had has changed the game, the face of the landscape, I think, in the Premier League. And I think that for sure, United, do they change manager? Do we, a year from now, then whoever they bring in, Zidane, and then you're going to just have a full circle again. I think for me, the logical thing to do is say, you know what, Mourinho's there, he knows what he's doing. Maybe have a look at signing a few players that are his players as well. I'm not so sure some of the signings that have been taken on board are his type of signings as well.
The state of play is, unless you're a sugar daddy club, and we're only looking at Man City, PSG, I think there's one more. But apart from that, every other business now is a financial vehicle to extract money. And the truth of it is, and we've seen it at Arsenal, the truth of it is, if the owners can finish top 4, not spend too much on transfers in, they are thrilled to bits. And they were happy with it. They're not bothered. They just want a cash cow. They don't care if the cow dances and sings for the fans. They're not looking at it as the biggest church and gathering of theatre in a city. They're looking at it as just pure revenues. And Woodward has come out and said this, where it doesn't really matter what happens on the pitch. And they're happy with that. And the Glazers take out over $1 million every year for the kids. They cash in shares for themselves. And that is the hardcore fact. So my point is that it all depends on the manager. And Mourinho for 3 years has bored the hell out of me. I went to the semi-final. I've just moved, listeners, if you listen, I've just moved back after 20 years, very happy to be home. Couldn't wait to get to Old Trafford. I haven't been there since the late 80s. I went to the semi-final of the Europa League and I was beyond bored. And this is for Mourinho after 3 years. You can't, especially at a big club like United. And that's why the players are fed up after 3 years. It started a year ago with Pogba. You don't even. There's no point finishing 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th with miserable football. You'd rather lose 3-2 every week or 5. Not every now and then. You've got to have some form of football as entertainment at ideally every club. And and some of the clubs that come through are trying to do it. Fulham, and I understand there's a business element. You want to stay as the biggest money in the world in the Premier League. It's shared equally the TV rights, which is very unusual compared to the foreign leagues. I get that. You've got to have a certain amount of resilience and maybe even dourness, but you cannot have Man United, the theatre of dreams, hoping to make the least mistakes and playing defensively. It's just, I'm sick of it. I'm bored. I'd rather go. I'd rather go and have play bat and ball or something. Anything. You can't have that. Mourinho's been getting away with that, and his modus operandi does not work at big, proactive, adventurous clubs. You've got to have a sense of romance like Ferguson did. Of course you need defensive underpinnings in any team, but that is why the players have had no... I know player power has grown inextricably since Bosman ruling, but... It's not about that. It's about you cannot. And I was just been reading Ferguson's book as well, Leading, and he's the same. You can't just run an organisation on petulance and fear. You can't do it anymore. And these players are powerful, but ultimately it stops with the manager. And you can't just even pre-season he'd ruin the whole season for me with his miserable. It's like you're the man, enjoy it a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think for sure, and I think that. It's an interesting situation there. I think that he's certainly been under pressure, and I mean we look at last season, they finished second, and the goal was to finish in the.
I don't care if we finished sixth with that football. There's no football. I've watched no football for 3 years. I can't. So it should just be called Manchester United Club, not Manchester United Football Club.
So from your perspective, would you prefer United finish seventh and play?
I would rather. The whole point of going to football is to watch football. There's been no football.
But what about the board?
That Pogba to Marshall Marshall to Pogba to Marshall goal is the first football I've seen.
Yes.
The point of I managed to put 11 people together to play football. The point of a football club is football. I have not seen any football for 3 years. What more damning can it be? I don't care if we finish fourth and make $1 billion for the Glazers.
So maybe the fans out there, United fans out there, can email. And let us know there.
Please. We've not even thrown out. We've been speaking for. If you're listening, get involved because we're on the. What's our Twitter handle or Facebook?
For sure on the Facebook page, the Weekly Sports Show. Drop us a comment on the Weekly Sports Show, and certainly drop us an email at Salford City Radio. We have to get the email address for you out there. But
this inaugural show, you have to forgive us a few technicalities, but we're here for the long term.
But certainly the Weekly Sports Show on Facebook. Log on there, and leave us a comment and a message. But would you rather United finish 7th or 8th, or play expansive football, or finish second and get in the Champions League? I know what the
fourth is a big for fans and owners.
Precisely. You took the words out of my mouth.
It's a big position to be. You've got to get Champions League.
It is, and I think without the Champions League, it's a big club like United not in the Champions League is a disaster. It just cannot happen, really, in view of the board and the running of the club. And I think for me, but the way I see it from the outside looking in, I don't think there's collective responsibility. I sort of look at things and think, okay, the manager hasn't really been backed in the media in the way I think he should have been backed if they're going to sort of stand by.
He's still got one of the richest squads in the world, one of the best squads. He's got to make them play greater than the sum of their parts.
I think so.
That's the main reason of a manager. He's getting less than the sum of their parts.
But you mentioned Ferguson, and it took him a few years to sort of get things going there.
Yeah, I was reading about him that he was too, believe it or not, he was too shy or hesitant when he first came to clear out the first team. Wow, he didn't want to do it lock stock. He wanted to be more organic. He said now that he's at this age, he would have done it straight away. So he puts that 4-year malaise down to that he was too kind, too soft.
Interesting stuff. I mean, no doubt Mourinho.
Well, I'd say the only charge sheet against Mourinho. I know there's people for and against, and that's fair enough. But that first knockout game at home against Sevilla was the most miserable, depreciating, the depressing thing I've ever seen in football. That how he set the team up to in a fearful way against Sevilla, and we went out against Sevilla, and it all started at the Rock. Because this is a good talking point. This is what I'm really intrigued in, and do get involved. You can send us a Twitter or Facebook on this. At the start of last season, we were thrumming. Everyone was playing. We were playing as one. It was all kaleidoscopic, interchangeable football, and everyone was assisting and passing. It was beautiful football. Pogba got injured for 2 months, and then the game against Liverpool, where they were on the ropes, we went in defensive. The confidence was knocked. We got a 0-0 draw. We never recovered. So it is a mood that's set from the top. that's we don't want to. We're not going to just talk. We're here to celebrate all sports, especially in the community. So we won't go on too much about football.
I think
but
so.
It's a great subject.
No, it's a fascinating subject.
It goes beyond football.
I think so, and I think for sure, and I think it sort of epitomises the Premier League in one sense, how important it is to get into that top four. I think Mourinho, for me, should be given full backing at least till the end of the season to put things right. That's the way I think at the moment. He's
lost the dressing room.
Yeah,
he has
that's the danger.
These results are all from the players. Yeah. They mutinied. They downed tools weeks ago in terms of performing. But they mutinied at half time to do their own stuff.
And that's what would worry me. What would really worry my concern would be if he doesn't get the full backing is that it sort of signifies that player power where okay, let's get rid of Mourinho, get someone else in to keep the players happy, and then what happens when things don't go their way again?
But players are going to leave if he stays. Marshall's at the end of his contract. They've got these 11 players at the end of the contract because of such a mean-spirited ownership. They've 11 players. They've got to do something. And the only thing is they don't want to sack him now because Woodward looks bad.
No, do you know? And that's a really interesting point you make there. And for me, you know what? I always say no one's bigger than the club.
Yeah, and that's Ferguson's.
No one's bigger than the club. If a player wants to leave, then the door's that way for me. Yeah. And I think there's some good, honest, hard-working people out there that costs them a fortune, a big proportion of their wage to go and watch United. They want to watch some good football, like you say.
Any football.
Yeah, precisely. And I think there is an obligation to play a good, expansive game of football. There's an obligation to win, obviously, as well, too. We want to make sure we win too. I mean, it's good. We saw years ago. I don't know if you remember the old Tottenham of how many years ago was when they had the five up front. Let's play, and that was great. And that was the ideal is they played some expansive football.
Yeah, we don't just want to be just tinsel. We've got to be some tree as well as the tinsel. It can't just be an entertainment purely.
Yeah, it is.
We know it's a good. We're not naive, but this is the polarity at the other end of drab, miserable. Look, if I'm a player, Pogba, I want to be in a team, and you see, especially when your neighbours are doing it, you want to be great. You want to. First and foremost, it's a creativity. It's a medium for creativity.
At what point do you get like a Pogba saying, you know what, I'm going to take this game by the scruff of the neck. I've played in the World Cup winning team. He was at a very successful Juventus team. He is a phenomenal talent, phenomenal player. There's no two ways about that. But the reality is, for me, looking at his body language sometimes, I don't know what's going on between him and Mourinho.
But Mourinho's forcing them to play defensive, reactive football, and it's killed his spirit. He's killed the spirit of all. Look, his history is littered with destroying the most creative people. Salah, Hazard, there's a list of them because he wants them to play in this mechanical. That's why he loves Fellaini, because he'll do whatever he says. Yeah, I mean, you can't. You need some imagination, and you need to take risk in life. Have you ever got anywhere without taking risk, Jim?
Well,
has anyone ever got anywhere without taking risks?
Precisely. But I think all things said and done, there's no taking away from the fact that he is a successful manager. He's won a number of trophies, and who knows, maybe the football that he sets teams out to play needs to evolve a little bit. But that's definitely going to be a story that's going to run throughout the season. That's for sure. On another note too, speaking of more local football, Salford won last week against Dover. Comprehensive win. They've got Braintree, who are at the bottom of the league this week. What's your take on? We sort of touched on last week's show very briefly about there's sort of mixed reviews about Salford, the finances involved in sort of moving them up. There are people out there that sort of probably can't wait for them to get to League Two and disappear from the non-league stratosphere. I mean, what's your take about now money entering the non-league stratosphere? I mean, we talk about it in the Premier League, but now in the non-league, is that a good thing? Well,
that's why it caused more consternation down there, because obviously the Premier League's very moneyed, and people don't even notice the money anymore in it. But they are the Halley's Comet of football teams, a third promotion in a row. Yeah. And the distortion between how much money they've got versus the league they're in, that is what's causing the trouble with other teams. But look, we're 40 years into a serious capitalist, moneyed world. For me, to moan about money is a fool's errand, because it's there. What are you going to do? Yeah. I know it's tough when you're grafting and you're using all your talent and skill as a manager to go out through every hour of the day to source players, to meld the team spirit, to put out with minus the money, and then you get these swaggering class of '92 lording it up and going through just blasting through every league. Of course, but it's one team out of all of them, and what can you do? We're living in an advanced capitalist.
Yeah, we've seen the likes of
society.
the likes of Fleetwood's done it before, as well. But equally in saying that, you've got like the likes of a Burton Albion that did it in a different way. They kind of sort of...
Well, look at Forest back in the day.
Yeah, Yeovil as well too. They sort of... I don't know.
You got to get on with it. We can't change. I'd say
so.
to the league, you can't. It's legal.
Yeah,
it's not it's not morally sound, but a lot of the modern world isn't morally sound.
But there's going to be people thinking, okay, if one day Neville wakes up and Lim wakes up and says, you know what, we fancy doing something else now, where does it leave the club? And that's just a danger as well. I think in one sense, okay, I don't know what the position is, and it'd be great to speak to Neville and see what his thoughts are for the future.
Well, it's the same with any guy. Yeah. If Glaze says, exactly. Right, let's make another $500 million, but then someone will step in. Oh, that's different. You're right. But I think with the class of '92 and very emotionally attached with the heritage and I think.
Sometimes he's going for the ride as well, and I think, like he says there, I mean, we know money's in the game now.
Yeah.
The romance has gone to that point where, from the financial point of view, there's not really going to be a Nottingham Forest again.
No,
that ship has sailed for me in the sense that, you know what, it's the modern... There's money out there.
Money skews everything now.
And people have been saying the bubble's going to burst, and I can't see it bursting.
I know.
I really can't.
And I've been thinking that for a long time. But if anything, and this is why the Glazers are hanging on, it's not going to burst. It's going to inflate, believe it or not. It's going to be as big as Brazil at this rate, because the big money is when it starts to get into the tech will start getting into broadcasting rights. At the moment, it's still BT and Sky and traditional broadcasting companies, and there's a little nibbles of it with Amazon and Facebook getting involved and showing European leagues. But once the big boys of the Silicon Valley get involved, the money's going to rocket again.
I think so too.
And this is even without England, and they're dreaming. The Glazers are dreaming upon hopes of the best Christmas of all. The league changes the structure to the Spanish model, where the top teams get the most money, and I mean, then they'll be set up for 5 dynasties.
No, I think so. And the concerning thing for me, I mean, I'm a big follower of the Serie A, and Napoli's my team in the Serie A. They have been since I've been 5 years of age. And for them to win the league over there, and you've got Juventus, who's won the league for the last 7 times and in a row. And this season they've signed the likes of Ronaldo. They've signed the likes of Bonucci. You think, for goodness me, and they're talking of bringing
the Champions League, isn't it?
Pogba back, and you think, well, how can Napoli really compete? And there was a lot of speculation that Napoli were going to sign Ronaldo, but literally the president of the Napoli Football Club said that if they had a sign, it would have bankrupted the club. Now, there has been rumblings that the way that Juventus signed him was through the owner of Fiat.
It was through Fiat. And the workers all went on strike, saying, how dare you waste that much money on it?
Precisely.
And that's why they can't afford Pogba now, because they've had their big splurge.
Exactly. And you know, I suppose in saying that we know there's been a lot said in the media about Ronaldo off the field, and it's probably not an area to understand very well. But we've seen how what goes on off the field can impact on the club. I believe had 10% knocked off their shareholders. So you know, there is, and clubs are going out there doing the best they can to protect their interest. And I think for me, someone texted me, and I won't name the source, a couple of tweets that Juventus sent out. When the situation had happened, the allegation as is at the moment, and at the moment Ronaldo's lawyer has defended the allegation, the rape allegation. But I think for me, one of the things that sort of would concern me was I think for me, these things go to court and decisions made in court. It has kind of antagonise the public. I don't have a position on it because I don't know the situation well enough to understand what's going on.
We should be the status quo for anyone. We don't have enough information at hand.
Precisely. But the concerning thing is that the reaction after the tweets on social, for both parties, I mean, I believe that the reaction towards the woman and Ronaldo has been quite disturbing. People sending out threats and that sort of stuff. Really, no one knows. I mean, in the end, they're the only two that really know what's happened, and it'll sort of come to a head. But I think sort of one thing that we sort of can see from the point of view of football is, I must admit, my point of view was I thought that some of the messages the club put out there on Twitter, I think without knowing the full story, probably antagonised people Because in the end, let's look at it in the cold light of day. We don't know what's happened. There's an allegation there, and it needs to be treated seriously. No doubt anybody who's got children, a daughter, a wife, or whatever it was, and if you sort of personalise it, that's a human being there.
Yeah.
We don't know what's happened. And I think for me, certainly there's been a lot of rumblings out there. The club have backed their player, and they've talked about their player in the football. There's no taking away from the fact that Ronaldo is a great footballer. He's carried on playing good football. I watched Juventus on TV the other week, and he scored a fantastic goal. There's a lot that's going to come out of that, but obviously, it's affected the club from a financial point of view. And it goes back to you saying earlier that the clubs are becoming this business. And I think for me, certainly from the point of view of the fans, they're being taken away from the game in the sense that, it's getting to the point that a lot of the morals about the game are centered towards the club's value.
Yeah.
And this is an example really where, it's a very contentious issue, and like I said, I don't really have a position on it because I don't know a great deal about it, but reading between the lines, the club has continuously backed their player, which they're entitled to do to a point, but let's sort of wait and see what happens, and let's hear from all sides of the story before a position is taken.
Yeah, I think to issue sport, we have to talk about it because sport reflects society very much so, the human condition. And you're right, if anyone with this kind of allegation, nothing should be put in the public sphere until it's concluded, is my thoughts.
Yeah,
and also, I hate this idea traditionally that sports and politics should be separated, and sports people shouldn't have. They're exempt from everything because they're sports people, and they're hallowed and they're feted and so they're exempt from anything. I think sports people like with Kaepernick should get involved because they do have a following, and I know they separate it out because of everything's commercial and affects their value. But yeah, it'll be interesting to follow that, and we will follow that along with many other things and topics here. We've got so many topics. We've still got 15 minutes left of the show today. I just want to have a quick look at a couple of books that have come out this week in the sporting world. Look interesting. One is Forgotten Sports by Edward Brooke Hitching. Now, why do some sports have made it to modern day age and why some haven't? I mean, for example, we don't play handball. Do you know handball? It's big in Europe, but
huge in Europe, yeah.
But it hasn't made it here.
No.
But the thing is, I'm going to give you 3 sports here that haven't made it, that were big sports. Fox tossing. You can understand why that didn't make it, perhaps. Aerial golf. Now, what's that? Aerial golf.
Wow.
I just heard that about get involved if you know anything about these sports. Maybe you played them. Auto polo. Is that water polo with a little engine?
Possibly. I don't think I've come across that sport either, to be fair.
But it's a good book that's released. 2 sports that were very prominent though in the 60s and 80s. One was octopus wrestling. Now this was in America, and this was a huge sport, as big as probably soccer is in England. And this went right on until the 80s, where they dived down, and some of these guys had to wrestle 10-foot octopus, 20-foot up to the surface. Gee. And wrestle them because they're powerful. A lot of muscle in the suckers, and the beak could nip the air tank. And that was a thriving sport until obviously modern day sensibility stepped in and showed that it's probably not, the octopus is not enjoying it. It was unconfirmed. They couldn't actually ask the octopus, but that was a huge sport. And also ski ballet was a big sport at the Olympics in 1998, 1992. Ski ballet, you can imagine that's a bit more lends itself to your imagination with the fancy outfits and all the spinning. But yeah, it's a fascinating book. I'd recommend that this week. Forgotten Sports.
It'd be interesting to see anyone as well interact the Facebook page, the Weekly Sports Show, and let us know any sports that you know of that haven't quite cut the mustard. And my suspicion is the combination, multifactorial. You've probably got marketing, you've got tradition, you've got, I think certainly in Europe and South America, football has long been in the DNA, the traditional sports, and that's the number one sport. But equally, there's a place of other sports too, and I suppose it's multifactorial.
Yeah,
a bit of marketing, a bit of
cultural.
Yeah, cultural. Yeah, for sure.
We don't play kabaddi; it's huge, isn't it? Overseas.
Yeah. That's how I don't see myself wrestling any octopus.
That's a symptom of its times as well. You won't get many people doing that. 21 foot was the winning. Wow. There was a world class gold medalist every year as well. But so that's a good book. Also, another good book this week that you might want to distract yourself with, and you're well placed to comment on this, Jim, as you know him. But It's called Tackled, released by Ben Thornley, who was the best player of the class of 92. Giggs, Beckham, they all said it was the biggest shame. Going right back to Sir Matt Busby, Bobby Robson, they all said this was the hero of the class of 92. And he was in a game just before he was going to play FA Cup Final for Man United in 94. He was playing for the reserve. 60 minutes in, the manager said, "You better come off, Ben." He said, "I'll just do another 10 minutes." 7 minutes later, this 28-year-old from the opposite team, it didn't just tackle him, it was one of the biggest destructions of the knee joint apparently ever seen by the Man United medical staff. It broke all the meniscus, it exploded the kneecap, basically put him out. And it's an interesting look at what happens when you're that high, when you flew that high, and then what happens subsequently. How do you rebuild your life? You actually know him, do you, Jim?
I don't know him personally. What it was, when I was working at Bury FC as a performance coach, Ben came along and he was on trial with the club. He was sort of training again, getting himself fit again, and so I met him then, and we had some conversations then, and he came across as a really, really good guy, really, really salt of the earth person, and football's his passion, obviously. And you can't help think that, imagine him and Nicky Butt in midfield and Scholes, and what a phenomenal midfield that would have been. I think from the outside looking in, Ben, when he was at Bury, training with us at Bury, I would say that looking at things from an objective point of view, the injury probably took its toll on him. I would say that physically, as well as possibly, and Ben's probably in the best place to comment, maybe mentally too, because you're playing for one of the biggest clubs in the world, and obviously what it means to play for United, and you go to United, and there's not many clubs in the world like Manchester United. And then, no disrespect to Bury, I've worked there for 4 or 5 years, and I had some great times there and some great people that worked there, and it's a fantastic club. But it is a League One, League Two club as well at the time, and you think, okay, so you're going to go from playing in front of 70,000, 80,000 people to 2,500, 3,000 people at best, and the training ground wasn't great. We used to train at Goshen over in Bury. Now they're training over at Carrington. It's a really, really good facility. Not that takes anything away from the effort we used to put in there, but obviously it was what it was, and it was no comparison to obviously United training ground. So I think for me, I thought he was quite good for the young players. I thought that some of the younger players at Bury benefit from him training there, because he could sort of share experiences, what it was like to play at the highest level, and obviously his experiences. But equally in saying that, I think reading between the lines, it might have been the motivation. You can't help but be on a downer after that. It's like having a burger at the Midland Hotel and having to go for a Big Mac or something. Yeah. And everything's mental. It's Mental Health Week, and everything stems from us mentally. So, of course, and you'll see if you read it, you'll see that the descent that he went on, which he would do, and but he seems in a good place now. So I believe that he went to I stand corrected on this, I believe he went to Bacup for a bit as well, and I'm actually at Bacup now doing some work there at the moment, and I'm not sure, I'll have to read the book, but I believe he actually went to Bacup, which obviously Bacup, also you had David May had a stint at Bacup.
What is Bacup?
Bacup Borough Football Club is the team over in the semi-pro league. So
Bacup,
Bacup Borough Football Club. And a big shout out there. The manager there, Brent Peters, he's been around the game for a long time. And
hello, Bacup FC.
Yeah, he had a 20th year celebration. Manager for 20 years this year, and involved the club for 20 years anyway. And he's a fantastic guy and does a great job there. But at one point, he actually had David May come play for Bacup, so they're in the northwest counties too now, and I've only recently gone back to help out and do a few bits and pieces, but David May was there apparently, so I sort of we sort of had a bit of a banter at one point saying, okay, so 1 week he was playing in the Champions League winning team, David May, and then he finds himself at Bacup 50-60 fans, but the passion in non-league football, and I really think that if you're a fan, get down to watch non-league football if you can. It really is true.
It's refreshing.
It's fantastic, and I love it. And one of the reasons for getting back in the game at that level, I've got other interests these days too, but I still work in the game as a consultant, mainly with individual players. But one of the reasons for sort of getting back in, and I work outside the game in other areas too, but one of the reasons for getting back in the game was just the love for the game. I sort of fell out of love with the game a while ago, to a point that, you know, like you mentioned, the business side of it and all that sort of thing.
I fell out with Man United.
And I think recently sort of getting back in the game at non-league level has brought a passion back, just to see those players. And
yeah, you're right. Yeah. I recommend it. I follow Wigan. I followed Wigan, which is not even lower. But any level you go at, just to feel that sense of collectiveness, and you're part of it.
Communal spirit, it really is.
Community.
Yeah, it really is. And I think that's one thing for me. The game sort of at the highest level has gone away from that communal spirit. And you know, last year I went to watch a few different games, and you know, don't get me wrong, the atmosphere is great, and it's fantastic to go as a theatre, as a spectacle. I went to watch City play last year against Napoli. I went to a couple of United games as a spectacle to watch some of the big players we see on TV. It's phenomenal. But equally in saying that, I think that sort of raw power you get at that sort of lower division. You know, you go to Rochdale, you go to Bury.
You very much feel a part of it.
I think so.
And that's one of the joys of being alive and well-being is community. Community and nature will never go out of fashion. And you get that. You get that. You get to know the kit man. You can hear your voice. They can hear you on the pitch.
You know, for sure.
So yeah, we're definitely going to be coming around all the great. There's so many great institutions, Salford. I'm very much looking forward to